This is John Shirley with the Hood County Express. I'm here at the historic courthouse in downtown Granbury with Mark Lowery, candidate for Hood County Judge, for the big interview. Mark, when we start out with the bio. So very quickly, my understanding is you're from the Midwest and you went into law enforcement and you later went into federal law enforcement. You have a family. You retired and went into private practice of some sort. And here today you find yourself as a candidate for Hood County Judge. And that has an asterisk that goes with it, Hood County being, the blood sport capital of politics in Hood County. So that's as much as I'm going to say, because I'm going to leave most of this for your edification. And please tell us all about you, Mark.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm excited what I'm seeing in the Hood County Express.
Thank you.
I look forward to continuing to work with this publication. So you're right. I grew up in a little coal mining farming community in south central Illinois, and my dad died when my brother and I were little, and Mom got a job about 2 weeks after Dad passed away and worked the rest of her adult life and successfully raised 2 boys. My brother ended up being a lawyer, and I ended up getting in law enforcement. And then, I earned a football scholarship at Illinois State, played football 3 years, tore up a knee. And then like some of my other teammates, when they got injured, they typically drifted off. But I stayed committed and got a degree in corrections, which is now criminal justice, sociology with a business minor. And I was always excited to be involved in community and didn't want to work in an office. So applied for the police department, St. Louis City and St. Louis County Police Department. They're both police departments. And the police department hired me, St. Louis County Police Department hired me in '77. And was a uniform patrol officer my 6+ years.
I'm going to pause for just 1 second, Mark. I'm going to take you back. How old were you when you lost your father?
11.
And, from an 11-year-old perspective, what kind of impact did that have, and how do you think that changed your trajectory in life?
Looking back on it, as I look back on it, I'll be honest with you, it's a challenge because you're between a young man and a child, and I was always big for my age, so I seemed to get bullied, and I didn't have anybody to go home to help me with that. And I look back now, and I think that's where I first developed the attitude that I wasn't going to let people bully me. As you know, as being a police officer, if you let people bully you, you might as well turn your badge and gun in and go home, because that will cost you your life. But I worked hard. I knew I had to work hard to get ahead because I didn't have any inroads that was going to set my path forward in the future. Dad was a builder, successful builder, built the last home he built was the best home in my hometown, and also built the bank, the Farmers and Merchants State Bank there. And he was suffering from the cancer and died after he got those 2 projects finished. So I think it made me take on more responsibility at a younger age and take care of myself. Mom didn't remarry till I was a senior in high school. I'm sure now as I look back, she was young. She had her own desires, needs, but she put those aside for her 2 sons.
Right. So your dad being a builder, your mom being a homemaker, and then of course being the breadwinner for the family. How'd you end up in law enforcement?
Well, after I got hurt my junior year, I actually looked to join the Marine Corps. I was working in a children's prison, confinement center in Peoria, Illinois, which was about 60 miles from where I went to school, college. And stopped at a Marine Corps recruiting booth. It was right after, about 3 months after I'd had my knee rebuilt, and I was saying, maybe the Marine Corps. And they wouldn't take me because of my unhealed knee. And so I was down for Christmas in St. Louis. My brother went to law school. And I had the desire to get into a service type, whether it was military or law enforcement. And I ended up making an application for the police department. And got hired. It took, that was would have been my senior year Christmas. I got hired in the following August of the following year, August of 77. May have been September of 77.
Okay.
But
Well, St. Louis, was it like, tell us about what led you to St. Louis in particular as your choice, or where you found yourself in your first law enforcement career, and give us a sense of what being a rookie in a police academy in St. Louis and on the first days of street are like.
well, it's an eye-opener from a small-town country boy. Went away to the confines of a university where everybody thinks alike, acts alike for the most part in college. Being a farm, country boy like me, I went to the big city of St. Louis. Number of reasons. My brother was going to law school there, and I wanted to work in a big department, and so I made application there. The academy, we went to the same academy side by side with St. Louis City cops, and now they've even worked closer together because of what's going on in St. Louis. But as a rookie police officer, your eyes are opened. You know this.
Absolutely.
It's the underbelly of the world. Basically, as a police officer in major metropolitan areas, you see the worst of humanity. And it changes a man and a woman, but it changes a man in his perspective of life. You have to balance the greatness of what God created with basically evil, of the terrible things that man will do to men and to children. So it was an eye-opener. That first 6 months on the street, I think one of the very first calls I got was a suicide where a man wasn't dead, and it was head wound, and we're trying to hold him together, and my partner just, senior fellow, Vietnam vet, says, leave it go, he's gone. That's hard. And then my first Thanksgiving, this is a story I tell. I had a shooting on my first Thanksgiving. A mother shot 2 of her sons for fighting on Thanksgiving. Shot one in the back of the head, and it was a ricochet, but the blood involved. And the paramedics thought he was the worst shape, and the other one was shot in the leg. The one that was shot in the leg ended up dying because it clipped the aorta in his leg. The man with the head wound, it was no big deal. It didn't penetrate the skull. That was my first Thanksgiving as a police officer. Welcome to Thanksgiving. They don't invite you, and I used to tell people, cops don't get invited to your house for Thanksgiving or for Halloween or for Christmas to celebrate. They get invited because of usually a domestic violence case, because the holidays are the worst for these families.
Wow.
So, we laugh at it, John. We laugh at it. It's not funny, but it's where we live doing that career. You have to laugh at some of this, or
it'll drive you crazy otherwise.
Yeah.
What would you describe briefly as your hardest day you remember as a city cop, as a municipal level cop? We were talking before we started recording, and
the children.
Yeah. I have a distinct memory of myself when I was in homicide, having to investigate a case involving about a 3-4-year-old who drowned in this situation. Thankfully, it wasn't something violent, but the only memories at that time for me were of my own son. Remembering when he was that age and thinking, man, how that's devastating, and even though it wasn't my personal loss, you still have that personal feeling of loss because you're a human being. But anyway,
it's crimes against children,
right?
Where adults who are responsible for those children either sexually abuse them, physically abuse them, or flat out just kill them.
Right.
And that's the hardest part of being a big city cop, if you would. I'm sure it happens here, maybe not as frequently. Those are the hardest ones, the domestic cases. I love catching bad guys, and I was good at it. You know how it is. Some people have certain skill sets to do certain things, whether it's law enforcement or any other industry, but I had a special knack of catching bad guys. And I remember one night they put a bolo for a witness to a murder that was under a safe house, and 2 guys broke in and kidnapped her. Jeez. And they put a bolo out in the middle of the night, and sure enough, they rolled right by me. And what's funny, I get in behind him, I'm calling for backup. Car, vehicle, tag, everything matched. 2 people in the car, 3 people in the car, 2 in the back seat. And I put the bolo out, or I put the backup, request for backup, and they went down Lucas Hunt, there's Halls Ferry, took a left on Lucas Hunt, and then a right, I can't remember on the street, but I knew it was a dead end. So I said, well, we're going to come to an end of this thing pretty quick.
Right. Something's about to happen.
And they stopped at the dead end with a big barrier, and I stopped and I got out. Of course, I'm still, here's where we are, and I need it here now. And I get and drew down pulled them all out of the vehicle, set the victim down in the street. She wasn't happy. As it was all said and done, I'm thinking, I probably just saved your life. Mm-hmm. We had a place called Mo Bottoms, and it was out by the Missouri River, and we often found people executed out there. I'm sure that's where they were headed. But I had a knack for catching, I'd catch bolos, bank robbers. I caught a couple bank robbers. I caught a guy that had broken out of prison, Arkansas, I think, or Alabama, and he breaks into a doctor's office there at the Halls Ferry Wedge. Doctor comes in the morning. He steals the doctor's white Cadillac, robs his medicine, robs his cash, and they again put a bolo out for a white Cadillac. Army fatigues, green Army coat, and I'm sitting there at the Wedge with the detective, and this guy walking by, and it was a neighborhood predominantly African American. This guy's white, walking south towards the city.
Call that a clue?
And he had a green Army jacket on, and I said, Joe, that looks like him. And he said, no, he's in a Cadillac. I said, Joe. And I went and pulled him behind him, got out of my car, walked up on him, and I said, stop where you are. And he stopped. I said, turn around. His hands was in his coat pocket. And I later got admonished by Joe, because he comes running out. He said, you should have drawn down on him. Because he did. He had a 9mm in his pocket. Ooh. But I told Joe, I could see the back of his hands. You're observing everything. And I said, Joe, if he'd have pulled his hands, I would have known it. But that was him. Yeah, that was a good capture.
Excellent. Well, kind of pulling down the veil behind the badge, law enforcement is hard on a family life. And I know from my own personal experiences in law enforcement and having to manage those things with family, that's a hard thing to do. Tell me about some of your experiences, and did you find that difficult, and what did you do, or how did you find a way to keep things flowing correctly?
Well, it is hard. It actually, and I don't know if anybody knows this, I was married before. I got married about 2 months before I became a policeman in the academy. And my first wife couldn't handle the lifestyle of a policeman and left me. And eventually we got a divorce. She just couldn't handle the lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Shift work, the stuff we bring home. And I have no ill feelings to that. I probably was as much to do with the breakup as my first wife. Mm-hmm. But leading forward, I married a perfect woman for law enforcement. My present wife, I started dating when I was a policeman. When I got in the Secret Service, we got married. We got now over 40 years. Wow. And as you know, it takes a strong-willed woman to be married to a police officer. Mm-hmm. The ups and downs that we have, especially when the Secret Service, when I was gone for long periods of time, my wife ran the whole house, paid all the bills, took care of all the children, took them to when they were sick. I mean, it's a big responsibility, and a lot of agents' wives leave them because of that. Mm-hmm. So well, and I think we advance forward. My wife's, and people I think in this community will realize just how strong my wife is, right, from her experiences. Right,
absolutely, without a doubt. Kind of along with that, what would you say is the role of your spiritual life? And kind of tell us how that's evolved throughout your life or throughout your career.
Yeah, so I was raised in a home with a Christian mother, and my father was a strong Christian, as I've been told. I don't recall a lot about my father, but I've been told by friends of his that he was a strong man of faith. We were raised as Methodists. Mom would get us in our ties and shirts and take us to church every Sunday morning. But I didn't have a relationship with Jesus Christ until I was older, in my 30s, mm-hmm. what I would say, and most people would refer to a born-again Christian. And I think God percolated me over time, and I found there was no place to find good comfort foundation without Christ in my life. And I remember buying a men's Bible study, and I just started to pour into it, and it just really, the disappointment of my early years of losing my dad and all of that just kind of melted away. Mm-hmm. I believe in a greater design. I believe in a greater plan that he has for us, and all these pieces of my life are being brought together. He has a plan for me. Mm-hmm. And so my walk with Christ has been much stronger after my early 30s, and it sustained me through some very difficult times.
Right, absolutely it does. You mentioned the U.S. Secret Service. So how long were you with St. Louis?
A little over 6 years. I started in like August, September, 6 years, and then I left and got the Secret Service job in December of '83.
And what was the deciding factor for Secret Service? And the reason I say that is, when I was with Houston, it was very common during my era with guys who came in with me that at about the 5-year mark, you'd have a pretty decent percentage of guys leaving for federal service because they got the big city experience, the big city training, and of course the feds love that. So they have different reasons why they do it. I'm just curious to hear what caused that pivot in you.
Actually, I love being a cop, as I call it, as a real cop. I like the interaction with people. Because we do truly protect and serve people. A buddy of mine on the police department had less time on the job than me, told me one afternoon he had applied for the Secret Service. And his father was a captain on the police department. I had nobody in my corner as far as connections. And I told him, I said, Kevin, I don't know anybody. But he had sparked my interest. I looked into it, and I went down and applied, and it took about a year to go through the single scope background investigation. And I wasn't disappointed with policing, but it seemed exciting to do the Secret Service work. It's funny, in the 70s, to the Houston PD at a hotel ballroom, because you guys had gone through some issues.
Mm-hmm. It was about the time my dad came on in the 70s, and
and they were recruiting guys up there in St. Louis. But I enjoyed being a policeman, real policeman.
But you were just looking for maybe the deeper waters that maybe federal service would offer.
And of course it excited me. President Reagan's attempted assassination had happened, and I started doing some more research, and it sounded, that looks like it'd be pretty worthwhile endeavor.
Right.
And certainly serve the country at a bigger level than I was.
All right. Out of the gate, what was your first assignment with the Secret Service?
St. Louis. I was told I was going to get hired and put in Detroit. That's where most of the guys got hired out of St. Louis, went to Detroit. Mm-hmm. The guy I told you about, Kevin, did hire him and sent him to Detroit. They hired me and left me in St. Louis. Don't know reason why, mm-hmm. but I didn't have any real relationships in St. Louis with any family members or police departments. But they hired me and left me in St. Louis, and I did about 4 years in St. Louis, working criminal investigations. We did the stolen checks and the counterfeit currency. And
we worked with Secret Service when I was with the Financial Crimes Unit at HPD. So
then we started to get into credit card fraud and then bank fraud and all that. So I was working there. And then they sent me from St. Louis to the White House detail.
Wow.
President Reagan.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So, I can only imagine, and if you haven't written a book, I imagine you probably need to. But to sum it up, protecting the president, I mean, every young man who's ever dreamed of having a badge and understands what a Secret Service agent is wants to be that guy. So what is it like to actually be that guy?
Unbelievable responsibility, first and foremost. You do observe tremendous amount of history. And it is the most powerful man in the world. The world changes because of what the president does or doesn't do, or his livelihood. Like, there's a lot of questions that would have come out. What would we have done in Vietnam in the 60s if President Kennedy hadn't been assassinated? Mm-hmm. So it's tremendous responsibility, even when you start in the Secret Service, like I was in the field office. You don't get a true understanding of the level of responsibility until you actually go to the White House detail. Now, I did a lot of what we call post standing. You fly around and set up the security platform created by the White House detail for the president. I was actually hired in '84. There was a campaign going on, so I traveled a lot to set up protection details. But until you actually go to the White House and work protection with the president, it's a tremendous responsibility, an awesome responsibility. But it's you travel, you see the world, you're in and around the most powerful people in the world, queens and kings and presidents and dictators, and you travel all over the world. But I think the first and foremost is the level of responsibility that you have. And I think it came to fruition to the American people after Butler. Mm-hmm. I think they truly saw after Butler how detailed a protective advance has to be and how quickly it can disintegrate. And we were so blessed. That was a God thing for President Trump not to be assassinated that day.
Right.
And it was a failure on the Secret Service part to doing a proper advance work. The level of detail is just unbelievable.
Right. Well, I guess what it accentuates to me is the amount of planning and preparation that has to go into every single one of these events. And when you have literally cascading series of events involving multiple dignitaries in multiple locations and cities, wrapping your head around that level of logistics is superhuman.
Correct.
And so I imagine the level of professionalism, at least that you experienced when you were there, is probably pretty humbling for any man, to be surrounded by other men that are experts at such a high-level task.
Yeah, and John, it's like the police department. Some guys were good at some things, some guys weren't. And you know who you could trust on a certain call, and you knew who you didn't want to be your backup man on a certain call. Mm-hmm. In the White House detail, there were those who specialized in the detail advance work, and that's kind of where I created a special talent. I handled some of the larger advances during my tenure there. The Economic Summit, where I had 8 world leaders at Houston at Rice University. I did the Olympics in '96 in Atlanta, had opening, closing ceremonies in an Olympic cluster. So I developed a skill set that attention to detail, and there is a lot of logistics, getting people to show up all over the world on time and perform duties where a lot of times in other parts of the world we have no authority. Mm-hmm. We have no authority to carry a gun. We have no authority to execute any type of laws. We're begging, really, the foreign military or gendarmerie, whatever you want to call the foreign police, to help us. We have no authority. We travel on a diplomatic passport, but the truth be known, if something happens, that may give you a little extra out, but for the most part, you're kind of really dependent upon your ability to convince and to get the spirit of cooperation from people that may not have any understanding of your culture, of your faith, of your logistics, of what needs to be done. Right. It is an awesome responsibility to put these advances together.
Well, I also see, the job of the U.S. Secret Service as being very unique in that you're expected to be masters of planning and logistics to cover every possible, worst case scenario that goes on. And at the same time, you're also expected to be that guy who can immediately take an unexpected situation that occurs, like a presidential shooting or the bombing in Atlanta, and being able to not only be that guy of massive planning, but be that guy that can immediately take control of the situation and execute unexpected situations to be able to apply your experience. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so 2 things that come to mind when you say that. You have to have a diplomacy, because the White House staff's objective is to get maximum exposure for a president. The Secret Service objective is to minimum exposure to the president. So you have to negotiate during the advance the whole time with the staff on what we want to accomplish, what they want to accomplish with the president in a safe and secure environment. So you have to be diplomatic. I mean, I've had some pretty touchy situations. One that reminds me down in Caracas, Venezuela, where we were up till 2 a.m. to try to get a final decision from the president and the chief of staff on what he was actually going to do in Caracas the next day. Mm-hmm. And the staff wanted him to be more exposed than we wanted him exposed. It ultimately came down to the White House. So you have to be diplomatic. You have to be, calm and collected. You can't get your way all the time. And I'll share experience about split-second decision and planning. I did President Reagan was coming to Ohio State University, to the auditorium there at the time. And of course, we started sweeping the place very early in the morning, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, probably. It was an early afternoon arrival, if I remember correctly. 12,000 person basketball arena. And we'd swept the whole place with the K-9 and the military and our EOD teams. They had found something that looked like a bomb, staged right underneath the bleachers. It was designed to look like a bomb. It was inert. It wasn't a live bomb. And so they went on about their sweeps. Angel, Air Force One, lands at the runway in Columbus. And now I know he's 10 to 15 minutes to my location, and he's coming straight to my location. We got 12,000 people now sitting in the stands, man, woman, child. Phone call comes into the university. There's a bomb in the arena. So I have to get with the EOD, the head of the EOD teams, the Explosive Ordnance Division teams, and we go back to the arrival point. And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and I said, "You think what we found earlier in the morning? You think that's it, or did we miss something? Right. God forbid you miss something." I know now that the clock's ticking, and so we decided, my decision, to start sweeping from the arrival point, start all over, sweep the whole entire building until the president left, until you either completed the sweeps or the president left. It was my decision to tell the president's detail to follow up the limo that they can come on in. And
that's a lot of responsibility to put on your own shoulders on the fly.
Yeah. So I now had a decision. I could have said, we have an incident here, don't come in. They would have taken him to a safe house or the other site. But I looked out and I said, 12,000 people didn't expect to get blown up today.
Right.
So it was a decision I had to make in pretty much not a split second, but pretty timely. And of course, everything went off without any issues. But it's you got to be attention to detail. You got to be able to process and think quickly
and be able to make the hard decisions when time calls for it. My understanding is you ascended during your career, and you ended up at the end of your career. Your last assignment was you were the special agent in charge of the Dallas-Fort Worth office. You'll be able to explain that better. Being a high operating Secret Service agent is one thing. Leading a large group of said high-speed Secret Service agents is a totally different thing. So tell me what it's like to be in charge of men like that, and tell me maybe the biggest thing you learned in your leadership experience when you were leading as a special agent in charge.
I think the biggest, for the most part, Secret Service agents are highly motivated, high operators. The compliments I get still to the day from the young guys now who are agents in charges and senior fellows, it's because they knew I never asked them to do something that I hadn't either done or wouldn't do myself. And they always knew I had their back. Our guys made mistakes once in a while, especially on the criminal side, maybe hit the wrong door. But you have their back, you support them, and they appreciate that, and they will literally run through walls for you if you treat them with the same respect, and they know that you will do everything that you're asking them to do. You will do the same. And I was a very effective agent. I did get moved along with promotions. The Olympics got me, that responsibility in Atlanta got me promoted to Dallas. Then I went from Dallas back to headquarters, and I actually was the agent in charge there of a headquarters division that oversaw all the building security for the Secret Service and all the background investigations, which you have to sometimes suspend a clearance or revoke a clearance, and you got to go through a very strict process to do that. Because if you revoke a clearance, it's a nuclear bomb for an employee. And we were hiring record numbers of employees at that time, trying to get the Secret Service beefed up. But because we liked Texas, and my family wanted to come back to Dallas, I did one of the boneheaded things is I went to the deputy director at the time and said, I want to get back to Texas. I took a demotion from the agent in charge to an assistant agent in charge in Dallas. Now, fortunately, my reputation, and I'm not bragging, I'm just saying because I'm a hard worker and attention, they promoted me into what's called senior executive service. It's an appointment from OPM, and I ended up being the agent in charge of the Dallas district. I had Tyler, Waco, Lubbock, and the Dallas parent office, all North Texas, and the Crawford Ranch under my supervision.
Oh, wow. And how many, I guess it's the greatest number, how many people would you say reported to you?
I had over 100 gun carriers, and you understand that. I tell people I had 100 staff members that carried badges and guns. You understand this, John. It comes to a higher level of responsibility, managing people that any given moment could potentially lose their life or take their life or take another person's life. So the phone never is silent. It's 24/7.
Right.
Because they're out working all hours a day, all over the world. And so you have to be prepared. And when you manage people with guns and badges and the authority to take the rights away from people, that's a tremendous responsibility to place upon the agent, and then of course the supervisor. Make sure you maintain the proper decorum.
Right.
Fortunately, you know, I was successful in that, and most of the guys appreciated my level of leadership. I was very clear on the expectations and very clear on the consequences if you didn't meet those expectations. And we worked harder here in Dallas than any other district because we got the president at least once a month in all of August, which means we had all those resources coming in from the president's detail, from the extra post standers, agents coming in down to Waco. It wasn't unheard of to have over 100 agents, especially if we had Prime Minister of Israel, the Queen coming in, or other, you know, Putin came in a couple times. So that just increases the number of bodies we have to bring in.
Right.
We had a very successful office here, productive office.
What kind of budgets were you managing?
Well, when you factor in the buildings, you know, because you manage the buildings and the care of those buildings and the maintenance of those buildings, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. The staff, you know, based upon the whole factor of the personnel, the HR, you know, their salaries, you know, all the factor goes into HR budgets. And then we had supplies, we had ammo, we had guns.
Oh, yeah.
You had to oversee all of that. You had to, you know, do audits of that because, as you know, if you don't keep track of guns and ammo, that could be devastating to a law enforcement department. Have some of that turn up missing. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right. So, how long ago was it when you retired and pivoted into private industry?
So I left in 2006, the Secret Service, and then Customs Border Protection, off of his internal affairs. Ralph Basham was the Customs Commissioner, and we hired so many Border Patrol agents after 9/11, they didn't have enough internal affairs offices. So he hired some Secret Service agents like myself, senior agents, back in, and I ran 3 offices for Customs Border Protection, Office and Internal Affairs. I had El Paso, Del Rio, and Dallas. And again, I oversaw the building of a building in Del Rio, the remodel of a building in El Paso, and the remodel of a building in Dallas. So again, attention to how we want the design of this building, make sure GSA is doing it, you know, not wastefully. And I did that I committed to Ralph Basham and Jim Townchick 5 years, and I left at 5 years. And then I went into the private sector for about 1.5 years. Oil and gas company. It just wasn't providing me what I needed.
I understand. I did insurance fraud investigation for a while, and I realized very quickly that I just didn't want to be in the insurance industry. But so I get that. So at some point you found your way here to Hood County, and tell us about that, and then also tell us how you and your wife Karen got involved in civic life and Hood County politics.
So I started a little boutique, as I call it, consulting business, licensed in the state of Texas, DPS, Private Security Bureau. And Didn't know how that would work out for me. It's been a blessing. I've done all kinds of good work for a lot of good people that needed help. I tell people I'm a fixer. You got a problem, I'll fix it. And I'm not being braggadocious. I'm humble about that because I have a pretty broad brush skill set. And so we started this company. We decided to move out of the hustle and bustle of Grapevine. And Karen found this place down in Granbury. We came down here. Of course, we knew Jim Jarrett for 30 years. I worked with him at Citibank. When he was at Citibank, he and I went on a fraud awareness program throughout the United States and doing TV, radio, community groups about fraud awareness. So Jim was here. We moved down here. We supported him when he first ran to fill Nin Hewitt's spot, I believe it was. And so we got a little bit involved in that. Then school board trustee Melanie Graft asked my wife to participate in the school book review committee. And my wife sat on that committee. And in our opinion, it was a fraudulent school book review. There were books she let me read passages out of for middle schoolers that clearly was inappropriate for middle school aged children.
Right.
And I take back to my police days. For children to be exposed to this type of violence and sexual perversion in a book at middle school is not good practice. So she was disappointed in how that played out. She got involved, speaking to churches, speaking to community groups about it, and then she just felt the calling that she needed to run. And she ran hard, she worked hard. We knocked on more doors in this county, met more people. And I think you would admit it was a shock when my wife beat her opponent.
I believe it was.
And that opponent was expected to win, was very popular in the community, and Karen won big. And then I think a lot of people know the experiences that played out during her tenure on the school board,
Right.
which was so disappointing for a school district to the senior fellows there. The superintendent treated her terribly,
Right.
absolutely terrible.
Right. Well, in I know from my own personal experience, in full disclosure, I've known both you and Karen for, I'm going to guess 4 or 5 years now, and seeing y'all come get more involved and seeing what the trials that Karen went through, and watching you stick by your guns and stick by your values, and that's a respectable thing, because too many people today are used to seeing their leaders say one thing, and then when their feet are put to the fire, they quickly shoot for the doors, or they're not quite the same man or same person they are when the fire actually starts coming as to before. So it's been really awesome to see y'all become part of the community engagement here throughout the years.
One of the things I think that they miscalculated, my wife and me in some respects, and this is my experience of what I've observed, there are a small group of people in this community that likes to intimidate and bully people. And their experience has been, when they do that, people shy away, they pull back. I don't think what they realized was that Mark and Karen were not going to be bullied. Part of that is the way I grew up and my business I was in, and we are strongly connected in our marriage, and we just weren't going to be bullied, and they weren't going to bully her and run her away. They wanted her to resign.
Right.
There was an all-out effort by a number of people to get her to resign.
Right.
She just wasn't going to do it.
Right. I'm glad you didn't.
I am too.
So what was your pivot in regard to your involvement that you were as with Karen on the school board and you helping her out and campaigning and such? Tell me about your pivot when you said, you know what, I feel the need to get involved. What was that for you? When was that? Tell me about that.
Well, it was back early August, maybe before. We all knew that the judge wasn't going to run again.
You're referring to Judge Massonville.
Yes. And I had heard who was running. And I started to get tugged into running. And honestly, I thought we had served enough between what my wife experienced and in my 35 years of serving the citizens of this United States, and in observing a lot of difficult as we talked earlier, a lot of challenging, difficult situations. I felt I'd served enough. And I woke up one night about, John, you're a man of faith. I woke up about 2 in the morning, couldn't sleep. And went out on my back porch where I do my daily devotional, and I sat there and I just, got emotional. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. It took me to the Psalms, 90 and 91. The end of 90, it says, God will establish the work of your hands. He says it twice. And I read through that Psalms. When I had the 2016 Republican National Convention, President Trump's first convention in Cleveland, it was probably one of the most challenging sites I had. Was there from January to the end of August. Secret Service didn't come in until 2 weeks to actually implement their plan 2 weeks before the convention. So that was ours. Understaffed, under budget. I read that Psalm 91 every day. Got up every morning. Gave me the strength to go to work each day. Because there was days, it was almost overwhelming. It wasn't overwhelming, but it felt like it sometimes. And I got done reading that again, and I said, okay. Got up, went to bed, slept like a baby, and I told Karen the next morning, I'm going to run for the county judge position. She was all in, 100%, never batted an eye. And that's how we ended up here today.
Wow. So now that you're a candidate, and we're in the middle, toward the end of the campaign season, what would you say the state of Hood County is? Not getting into necessary details right now on what these things are, but what would you really call the pressing issues, and how are we doing up to today at facing those issues?
Well, and I keep saying I'm running to be the change candidate. I am the change candidate. I think we need to break the establishment that's been really strangling this county on freedom, creative of speech, creative thinking. Again, seems like the same old people run the county. My concern is budget. I've seen some items that they've spent money for, not just countywide, but specifically at the court, that I don't think we needed. An FBI command center a few years ago. I think that was a waste of our taxpayers' money. I don't think they use it. They certainly don't use it enough that it justified that whatever turned it out. They just passed the contract with the architectural design for the jail and added 10% to all their expenses. If we do that over the $20 million and $24 million, $120 million bond for the roads and the $60 million budget we have typically in the county, if they allow such things to continue to get added to contractors, 10% can add up pretty quick. Nickels and dimes can become millions of dollars. The Hood Central Appraisal District. I don't care what they say, it's a shiny object, don't look over here, there's nothing to it. In my professional opinion of law enforcement, there has been a misappropriation of taxpayers' money, well over $1 million. They didn't have the authority to move it around without taxing entities' approval. They established a shell corporation because they didn't have the authority to do decisions, buy land, buy buildings. So they built a shell corporation with inside. Then they started moving money around without taxing entities' approval. Then they started putting money in the retirement fund of the county employees there without taxpayers. That's a fraud.
Right.
Now, my opponent don't like that word, but clearly in my mind, that's misappropriation of taxpayers' money. I think there's some crimes committed there. People need to be held accountable and mismanage our taxpayers. We work hard for those taxpayers' money. To give it to them, for them to just spend it like they have a whim. It's like going back to the school district. They bought an airplane. They didn't need an airplane. As soon as that airplane got discovered, they sold it. Well, if it was so righteous to buy it, why would you sell it? Justify it, which they could not do.
Right.
So it's budget items. The data centers are a big issue now. I think we need to pass the moratorium, and I hope we do so next time around. I don't want to see Hood County become an industrial center, industrial complex of these types of issues for two reasons. I don't understand the environmental impact long-term, as I have shared publicly. Growing up in Illinois with farmland, pesticides and insecticides in the 60s and 70s, we found out it was killing us in the 80s. I don't know what the environmental impact will be with these data centers. I know they use water, they use electricity, they level beautiful land and make concrete slabs out of it. I don't think we know enough about it. I also don't want Hood County to become an industrial center. I want it to be a tourism center. You come for the natural beauty, you come for the beautiful square. I'm not against businesses coming in here, light industry, some small manufacturing that can employ people. I would be supportive of that, not environmental hazardous stuff. What else? Obviously, HK.
Well, I'm just honestly, something you were saying a minute ago kind of leads me to my next topic I wanted to talk about. You were talking about the apparent fraud or the possible fraud that's been going on at HCAD. And the logical question as a citizen would be, well, why hasn't this been investigated by the proper authorities? And which really leads into my question. What do you see as a law enforcement professional with decades of experience at extremely highly elite levels? What would you say the state of the Hood County justice system and Hood County law enforcement is right now?
I think we're in trouble. Let me expand on that. First place, I believe subpoenas need to be issued. They need to have an actual criminal investigation, and they need to present it to a grand jury. That would be holding people accountable. If they're not guilty of a crime, the grand jury will find a no bill on them. I believe it needs to be brought with a thorough investigation by an agency that can investigate these types of crimes and presented before a grand jury. If you don't hold people accountable, it will continue. So for the HCAD, that needs to happen. I know I've presented cases to the district attorney here. I know he's understaffed and he's overworked. I get that. But you can't arrest people for felonies on what is low-level process violations, in my opinion, and I've spoken out before the court on this, and stovepipe your felony docket when you can't manage the felonies in the first place. Some of these people I'm talking about should have never been arrested. That's making a phone call, having them come in, work it out. Don't arrest them on the side of the street. Right now in our jail, I just asked the sheriff at the hospital district meeting, we had 10 illegals in our jail. I reviewed a PIR back from May to September, and the days of bed nights in our jail was 360 something to 600 bed nights a month. My question to two commissioners, are we holding them for ICE? If so, we should be paid for that. After 48 hours, they got to pay us. Or are we holding them for criminal violations here in Hood County? I'm a law enforcement guy, you're a law enforcement guy. We're professionals. Not everybody gets arrested. You have to make that tough decision. If we're holding an ICE detainee for a felony violation or a misdemeanor violation in Hood County, if it's not rape, robbery, murder, child abuse, or large drug distribution, turn them over to ICE, let them throw them out of the country, we'll catch them next time. But for us to back up our jails, back up the DA's office with holding these illegals, I think is a waste of manpower, time, and bed space. That, if I can win, I would like to sit down and work through that. I think we can diminish the number of cases he has on his docket. Again, this arresting people, I had what's called a blanket letter of declination, and I'm sure you had similar. In the Secret Service, you could work up a fraud if at the time was $100,000 or $200,000. If it was below that benchmark, from my desk, I could do a blanket letter of declination. I would send it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They would sign off on it. We would put it in the file. The case was closed. That's $100,000. That's a good case. But we didn't have the manpower in the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute everything. Right. So you had to make a cutoff somewhere. And that time was $100,000. I'm sure it's much higher now. In law enforcement and in the prosecution of crimes, you have to select and choose which ones are the best ones to prosecute. Mm-hmm. Not every person needs to go to jail. That's coming from a law enforcement guy. Knocking on doors all over this county, I've heard some of the most horrific stories about how they're being treated by law enforcement officers. I want to make this very clear. I'm not speaking bad about the character or the individual officers. And I've said this publicly. I don't think they have the proper training, and I think they lack the proper supervision. That needs to improve. Our citizens shouldn't drive around this community fearful of the sheriff's department.
Right. Well, then that kind of leads into, the recent arrest and attempted prosecution in some level of Colton Crowdinger in relation to that meme case. it kind of highlights that that case not only highlights that maybe people's perceptions of weaponization of law enforcement, but it actually also recalls to a lot of people's minds, that what happened to Colton was not the first incident that called into question maybe some of the judgment or whatever was going on over at the Sheriff's Department and the DA's office. Do you have anything to say about the Colton Crowdinger arrest, or what you feel about that?
Again, I spoke out at the court. This isn't classified information. I spoke out at the court about this. I spoke out when they arrested Steve Biggers for filling out an application on a Department of Public Safety form for a bus, on the weight of a bus, as I understand it. As I said then, I can't speak towards the elements of the crime, but I can speak on how they managed this crime. They worked those cases up in about 3 days. I had 2 hot check cases from a client that sat over at the sheriff's office for over 2 years and never was worked, over $100,000 in hot checks. So they go out and work these low-level process violations in 3 days to arrest Biggers, to arrest Colton, in my opinion, just to make a big bang out of it. That's not what law enforcement's about. They're here to protect and serve. And the more that happens, the people, the citizens of this community can see that happening. It makes them fearful. Our citizens shouldn't drive around this community fearful what's going to happen to them by law enforcement. And I've been outspoken about this, so I'm sure they're not happy with me. But that's not the way law enforcement should work.
Right. Well, it sounds like to me what you're describing is that there's a cultural problem in the justice system in Hood County, and we can't necessarily point fingers at individual officers because they're doing a job and they're following the rules and orders they're given from their leaders. But maybe what it does call into question maybe is the direction that the leaders are taking their individual departments.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing. It's leadership. That problem starts at the top. It's like when you asked me about my leadership skills. They knew I was not going to have them do anything I wouldn't do, or it wasn't legal, and that I've done before. I think it starts at the top. And these officers, even the good officers that are here, I can assure you they're intimidated by what's going on by some of the officers that aren't performing the way they should. It's sad because law enforcement should be that. When a man or woman gets into law enforcement, it's literally a life. It's a career. And they should not be fearful themselves about how their execution of their duties is going to be judged, and they shouldn't do it where it's borderline inappropriate, period.
Okay. Well, the next thing I want to pivot to is traffic. I've lived in Hood County for a little over 10 years, and honestly, one of the reasons that I was drawn to Hood County from Houston is that it was a small town without as much traffic. And I can say in the 10 years or so that I've been here, it feels like deja vu all over again. I'm back in the suburbs of Houston and bumper-to-bumper traffic between lights, and it's a frustrating nightmare. And so the reason I'm asking you specifically right now about this is because we just passed a big road bond, which means over the next, I'm just going to say 5 or so years, we're going to see huge parts of large thoroughfares and important road arteries torn up around here, and that's going to not immediately lead to a traffic solution. One day, hopefully it does, but it's not in the midterm. So basically, for the foreseeable future, the traffic woes of Hood County citizens are going to get worse. And so, kind of a two-part question. How, as a county judge, if you have any influence over anything involving that, how do you manage that? How do you answer the cries of your constituents? And number two, and I've seen this from the time when I lived in Houston and watched road projects go through, it seems like who suffers the worst during these road projects are the little mom and pop stores that line the highways that have survived, from when Granbury was a small town. And generally speaking, they're the ones who have the trouble staying open and their businesses surviving to see the other side of the construction. And so my two-parted question would then be, what's your word to the Hood County citizens right now looking to this construction coming? How are we going to manage that? And what would you say to the small business owners in these corridors who are going to be impacted by this, and what can we do to help them?
So this will take a little bit of time. I lived in Grapevine when they did the funnel project at 114, 121, and 635 by the airport. It was about a 5-year project. It was a mess. Some of the businesses in that area went out of business. I was talking to the Macaroni Grill manager one night, and I says, are you taking a hit on this? He says, absolutely, but corporate sees that if they can sustain us through the construction, it'll get better for us. Some of his neighbors went out of business. I also knew a fellow up there with Department of Transportation. So there's monies inside of that big money we'll get that can be used to help small businesses. So my first plan is to establish a committee, a working group of some of the small businessmen, a county commissioner, Department of Transportation, the construction crew, to have if not once a week probably, but once a month, to sit down, let the small business people bring information they're getting in from the small businesses, what the problems are, and have that dialogue with all those involved in the construction, so we have real time, hear the concerns real time and try to make adjustments. We are going to have some challenging times coming. So I think there's monies in that. We're going to start with the $120 million for the Granbury. Most of that's the old Granbury rope and loops in 144. I heard at the forum the other night, somebody said, we're not moving fast enough. It takes time, but the city, I know, just crossed another hurdle where they got some money from the state. They're starting a project. So as long as they're hitting these benchmarks, we're going to get the $700 million to redo 377. So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a mess. I went through it in Grapevine. Others have gone through it elsewhere. One of my concerns with the county budget is right now, 2024 tax year, our budget on sales tax was $8 million. Now, I don't know what it was 2025. I don't have that budget in front of me. $8 million from sales tax. We all know that when that road gets torn up, sales tax will go down. We're about $2 million in difference in budgets from revenues, from expenditures. So if we take out half of that sales tax, probably 3/4 of that sales tax, because of the impact construction has, we got to be real careful how we're managing our expenditures in our overall budget. So there's a lot comes to this. I'm going to want with the other commissioners, I get it, I'm not the only one, other commissioners to look at our expenditures and how can we save money going forward. I don't understand how our budget went from the 30 millions in 2019 to 60 million revenues. I understand that, but the expenses went in right behind it. They're right behind it. The revenues went up even though sales tax went down, or sales percentage of sales on the appraised values went down. I get that because the tax rate went down, but appraised values skyrocketed. Now we may have a slowdown in appraised values. Our home values may slow down. So that revenue is not going to be as strong. So we got to really watch the budget. We got to be careful. As far as this road, it's going to be a mess. We know it. It should have happened long ago. If it wasn't for Mayor Jarrett, honestly, I don't think we'd be where we are today because of his involvement. He's now the Northern Region head guy for Department of, from the municipalities for Department of Transportation in the North
Texas COG.
Yeah, so he's really got some influence in that. So we're fortunate we had him. It's going to come. It's going to disrupt sales tax. It's going to disrupt the tourism. It's going to disrupt people coming and going around Grapevine. We just got to hang in there. For the small businesses, we got to have a mechanism where they can communicate to us timely so we can try to adjust it. Plus, if we can get some money out of that package that I've been told we can, I'm not saying we make them whole, but let's say we take their monthly income from 2 years before the construction, see what that number is. Can we help them not completely offset it, but can we give them some money to try to help sustain them through this period of time?
Right.
It takes strategic thinking. It takes somebody trying to think through these things and then working, communicating with the community.
Right. Well, good. Similarly, on the economy, one of the reasons people decry the data centers is because they say they really don't bring the kind of jobs or enough jobs or good jobs to our community, and the jobs they do bring are often given to people who don't live in our community. So as county judge, how do you see you affecting our county's ability to draw good quality jobs and good quality businesses to Hood County?
Well, I think we got to work with the city in attracting companies. We got to sit down and say, okay, what type of businesses do we want to come in the city? I'm not for the data centers. I do think that they don't bring enough jobs, quality jobs to the community. The construction's a nightmare. And I'm not, listen, we've got documents signed by Judge Massengill July 9th offering them abatements. Now, that was a prospectus, I get it. But if they're willing to offer abatements early on, where would that come as they start sitting at the table negotiating? I do want us to try to encourage to get more jobs in here. I think working with the city, we got a beautiful place to come. We just got to select the right types of maybe light industrial manufacturing. You know, we used to have a really nice lawn company out here that had lawn chairs and such. In fact, we bought a couple of them. They're really nice. It maybe brings some of that light industry that brings manufacturing jobs in but doesn't pollute and causes problems with the pollution in the environment. But again, I think we need to stick with what attracts us here. Tourism, the downtown area, we got the golf course, we got the lake, we got the river. Those are things that's going to continue to attract. How we find better jobs is going to take, I think, reaching into some of our community. We've got tremendous talent in our community with people that are executives, retired people that can help us maybe navigate and bring some better jobs in here. So that's one of the challenges that faces.
Okay. Well, we've talked about data centers obviously throughout this conversation because it seems to be the topic du jour. And to me, you've been very clear about your stance on the data centers. And I kind of want to sum up the data center talk with some specificity, because I think one of the things that we get in trouble in politics is we allow politicians to talk in generalities in such a way that they never get pinned down to the point where you can actually get a straight answer on the specifics that are actually impacting the community. And so when it comes to data centers, two questions, or I have one very specific question and one for you to elaborate on a little bit. Of any of the current projects, data centers that you're aware of that are currently planned or anybody knows anything about, do you support any of those?
I don't. The one that the city don't have a proposal on the table, but we all know that they were looking at one specifically. I drove up to Irving, Texas to look at that facility. It's a nice tall building, got a big fence around it. It was quiet, but it has big diesel generators sitting next to it and air conditioner units on top. It sits in an industrial area. I think Frito-Lay may be a distribution center right next to it. It's the one that the city says was all no outside water, all self-encased. It was quiet and outside. I still don't like the way it looks. I don't think it offers. There were security guards there. Two of them come up to me when I was walking around just looking at the fence, trying to figure out what's what here. So we know they have security there. That's the one that probably environmentally may be the less impactful, negatively impacting our community. But still, you got these big diesel generators that are sitting next to it, which we know offer pollutants. So I'm really not in favor of them. One of them, according to what I've heard, and again, we don't get a lot of specificity, because the proposals aren't out there. But one of them is supposed to be like 2 times the size of NASA out in the Paluxy.
2 or 3.
Yeah, that's a beautiful area. I ride the motorcycle through there. That's the last thing we want to come in this county. I'm also hearing, and again, I'm not an expert in this field by any stretch, but in 5 to 10 years, much of this may be obsolete. Now what are we going to do with these big slabs of concrete and buildings? We got to be strategic thinking long term. At the forum the other day, they keep saying we're busting at the seams, we're busting at the seams, we're going to keep exploding. The question I have is, I'm much older than you. In 20 years, my generation, the baby boomers, will be dead. We're the ones that own all these houses in Pecan and Bentwater and all these beautiful homes that are valued at millions of dollars, a lot of them. When we start dying off, the younger generations coming up behind us, demographics say they're having less children, they're less likely to move, and the economy is not supporting them to buy these houses. So couple supply side economics is going to happen here. Because we got a glutton of homes, the value will go down, the appraised value will go down, taxes will go down, and we're going to have a lot more homes for sale. And we may not have the population to fill them. Now, I don't blame the builders for wanting to come in here and build all these new homes and sell them to people. They're looking at the short term. They're going to try development, build homes 5 years, they get their money and leave. I'm not against that. But we as a county got to think tax-wise, strategically, what are we going to do 20 years from now when I'm long gone with maybe a glutton of homes that are sitting vacant and we can't tax them?
Right. Good point. The final thing on the data centers, subchapter K, the moratorium, that's obviously has people's hair on fire right now. And really, you can just give me a very simple answer to this. Had you been on the court for the first moratorium call, like two-part question, I'm going to throw it up a little bit. Had you been on the court already, and you were there for the moratorium vote, A, would you have supported the proposal that was proposed in court the other day, or one that was more aggressive? And B, would you have supported from a moratorium no matter what was brought to the table?
Yeah, I would have supported the moratorium, and I would have liked to have had a year. I don't think you can get anything done in 6 months. I think I would have supported the moratorium. I would have supported a year. I think the law is in our favor. I was extremely disappointed. You had literally citizens lined up in the wall in the back. I think it was 22 and 22 speakers on both times throughout the day, probably 50 more speakers passionately speaking about this. In the afternoon, they produced this letter from a legislator out of Houston, not the AG.
Right,
Betancourt, a legislator out of Houston waving this thing around. The judge had Matt Mills read it to the court like that was going to make a difference, or read it to the public. I'm suspicious about that. One, a legislator out of Houston having any impact in Hood County on this court. Two, sending a letter to the AG. That thing just smelled to high heaven. I'd like to know how that letter got generated from Betancourt to the AG in the afternoon when everybody had put all the time in there, all the passion, all the energy, all the thought process, and then just like that, they voted 3-2 against it. I would have voted for the moratorium. I've been very involved in subchapter K. I talked about the Development Commission long before they created the Development Commission because I'd read subchapter K, and I said we need to establish that. I don't know if probably not the why they created it, but they did. I've been to those meetings. I think the Development Commission under Christine Leftwich is doing a great job. The first recommendation, the commissioners appointed Development Commission, the first recommendation they sent to the court, Commissioner's Court, they rejected it. Now that makes no sense to me. Makes no sense to me. Yes, I would have supported the moratorium. I would have asked for it to be longer. I wouldn't sign an NDA. I signed NDAs, but I wouldn't sign an NDA. If a company's bringing a patented idea to Hood County that they don't want this certain patent or process to be understood, that's one thing. But just to say that they don't want to discuss what companies coming to town, doesn't make any sense to me.
All right. So, as we said before about traffic getting really bad over the last 10 years, that kind of went hand in hand with the population explosion in Hood County. It hasn't been helped by Hood County being named the top place for retirees, the top 4th of July parade, the top small, we're just the top. And with that comes population because we're getting good press. And my question really isn't about population, it's actually about unity. As we bring in people from not only all around Texas, but all around the country, they're being introduced to Hood County politics. And as I alluded to in the very beginning of our interview, Hood County is known as a blood sport, where politics is the blood sport. And if we can't get along as a quote-unquote hard-red Republican county, and the perception is, and I'm not going to actually agree with it because I have my own opinions, but if the perception is we don't have any unity here in our big red Hood County, what can we do to fix the unity and at the same time be inculcating all these people that we're hopefully, teaching Hood County values? So tell me about how you think we bridge some of those gaps and how we bring these people in.
Well, it's a couple two-part answers here. I talked to a Texas Ranger that's been retired for 15 years, and he shared with me Hood County's been very difficult for years, decades, long before I ever came around.
That's my understanding too.
So that's concerning, why I would have that reputation. Two, I've talked on a lot of doors, and I get a lot of people asking me the same question, from California, from Minnesota. Why is there two Republican parties? Why can't the Republicans get along? I actually talked to a lady from Minnesota, said she was thinking about flying back to Minnesota the last election to vote. Now, I didn't get into the legality about that. She's a Democrat. And by the time I left talking about my principles in Republican conservatism, she had me put a yard sign in, and she's a Democrat. So here's my answer. I'm a member of the Lincoln Reagan Republican Party. It's not officially known as that. That's what I refer to it, because Lincoln established the Republican Party. Reagan saved the Republican Party. In his time, he was the right man at the time. Trump is the right man at the right time for us now as a Republican. But the Lincoln Reagan Republican Party stands by the basic principles of the Republican Party. We've had people that's left that party, started a different party. And I'm not going to change my principles of belief of conservative Republican Party to go join them or try to convince them to come back. The door's open. If they want to come back, as I said the other night, like the prodigal son, the father didn't go chasing after him. The son made a decision to come back. I will embrace them. I will give them a nice firm handshake, and I will embrace them and welcome them back into the Republican Party. We got to stand by our principles as Republican conservatives and not try to get outside of those principles to encourage somebody to come back. I think this division is really a small number of people that for whatever reason, and I think maybe this is your mindset, it's not a lot of people, it's a small number that left because they weren't happy with what was going on for whatever reason, and I'm not clear what, but unfortunately it has become toxic to people that don't know in the community, that hear this and see this.
They just want to plug their ears because it
Yeah,
all
they
sounds
just want to
so
stay away
nasty.
from it. In the bullyingness that's happened, the lies that are being told, it scares people, good people that would get involved, they're fearful to get involved. So, as the judge, I will remain a Republican, Lincoln Reagan, conservative Republican. I'll stand by my principles. I will not lie to people. If I make a mistake, I'll own up to it. And I want to encourage people, much like I did in my leadership roles. I want to encourage people to come in and work hard to accomplish the best for Hood County. I can only be hopeful that over time, as President Trump says, we're going to win and they're going to want to join us.
I like
And I'm not just talking about my campaign. Once we start producing things, and I don't know when this is going to go out, one of the things I want to do, and I've already talked to someone that will support me in this, I want to start either once a week or bi-monthly, have what's called like the county corner or the judge's corner, something where I can get on a platform and talk about the issues that are facing the commissioner's court right now, what it looks like going forward in the future, and encourage people to get involved. You don't hear anything about the commissioner's court or what's going on in the county unless you go to commissioner's court, which is 9 o'clock in the morning during a weekday. A lot of people aren't paying attention, but if you start reaching into the community through other formats, and maybe have a town hall meeting once in a while, beyond reaching out through a social media platform, probably the best, Lowery, is the best way to do a little update on what's going on in the commissioner's court. Get in people, reach out to people individually. I've already got a couple people in my mind that's qualified, experienced, professional, that I'm going to encourage to participate in volunteer programs within the county. That's how this works.
Right.
When we treat people terribly, they don't want to get involved in this.
Right. Well, I've been saying for a long time now that, as the baby boomers have retired out of the job market, we should have thousands of hours of volunteers ready to go. And so to me, a county that's functioning correctly, part of that should be leveraging the cadre of volunteers we have and apply their skills to help the county. Because, as you know, we've got experts of any subject you can think of. It seems like Hood County's got one of them. So I think that's another way we could also do that?
I went to the city council meeting a couple of meetings ago, and they were filling the P&Z and the parks and that. There were vacancies that nobody applied for. Then there were vacancies where multiple vacancies were bid on by the same persons. We should have an abundance of people wanting to participate in these community organizations. As you said, I said it at the forum, the first forum, I said, I think we have every skill set and profession in this county, except maybe not an astronaut, but maybe one will surface. I've knocked on these doors. I've run into an abundance of submariners. And submariners is not something you see a lot in,
right,
especially in Texas.
Right.
It's amazing. And we got doctors, we got a ton of lawyers, we got talented people. We just need to cut with the toxicity and encourage people to get involved. Make this county worthy to pass on to the next generation or beyond.
I like it. Well, as we wrap up, what would you want to tell voters who are unfamiliar with Mark Lowery? What would you want them to know?
Well, it gets back to what I was saying very early on. I've reflected back upon my life now more than I've ever had to do. And I've had to talk about myself more now in the last 2 months than I've ever talked about myself in my entire lifetime. I've come down to, because of my business and who Mark Lowery is, I'm a man of courage. I've protected presidents of the United States of America. They've trusted me with protecting their families, not just them, but their families. That takes a level, as you well know, takes a level of commitment and a level of courage and a level of willing to sacrifice one's well-being to help others. And I want the Hood County residents to know that I will protect them and stand up for them and fight for them the same way I've done for the President of the United States, the same way I did for my wife when they tried to bully her. I married her 40 years ago. I said I will provide and protect her my entire life. I'm not going to stand on the sidelines when men try to bully my wife. I'm not going to stand on the sidelines. I will do that for the residents of Hood County. And the other thing is I reflect back, I realize how much I love people. I've opened up my heart and emotions for examination over my career, and we've talked before about this. The great tragedies we've seen as policemen tells us how fragile humanity is, and truly how much I love humans, and I want to make them safe. I want to make them protected, provide protection for them. I want them to know that. I'll be there for them. I won't run. I won't hide from the problems. And if I make a mistake, I'll own up to it. I will never lie to them. I had a top secret clearance for over 30 years. That means something to me. It should mean something to the citizens of this county. And I think we got a great opportunity here. But you pointed it out earlier, John. There's some level of some toxic stuff going around here that we really just need to work through, work past it, work past this, reach out to people, make the county successful, get to the bottom of some of this misappropriation of our taxpayers' money. So I guess in essence, I want them to know that I'll stand in the gap for them. I'll protect them. And I love humanity, and I'm committed to make the county better for them.
Well, that's Mark Lowery, police officer, Secret Service agent, family man, Christian, public servant. Hood County has a big decision in a couple of weeks with who's going to lead this county going forward. I want to thank Mark Lowery for sitting down with me, and I'd like to thank anybody who waded their way through this big interview in Hood County. It's your turn. Thank you for joining us in the big interview.